You may realize that we're actually not so different at all. You may realize that we're actually not different at all. That we're ultimately just spirit masquerading as in lots of different costumes. When we're in the surface of things, that's totally forgotten. That perception is gone. Because we've entered into a world created by thought. But when we get underneath, we get into a world that's uncreated by thinking. Thinking is a virtual world. It's not a real world at all. That's why everyone's so damn alienated when you get into the world of thinking. 7 billion people on the globe. Why is it that so many of them feel sort of alienated and not really met as a person, as a being? Somehow unconnected from themselves or from each other in some fundamental way. It's because of the level of perception that most people are in. They're in the perception of noise. And underneath that level, turning consciousness back onto itself, it gets very quiet. Until the only thing there is perception itself. That's all there is. Sometimes people will call it consciousness. All there is consciousness. All there is awareness. All there is spirit. That's all. Appearing is everything else. And this, I guarantee you, this is not, we talk about this in terms of spirituality, but this is not spiritual, you see. This is just reality we're talking about, you know. That's all enlightenment is. I don't know how enlightenment ever got all mixed up into spirituality and religion. It has no business being mixed up. All of that just confused it. Enlightened beings and unenlightened beings and avatars and this and that and masters and it's just the whole thing got so hopelessly mixed up. So unimaginably confused. It's all just a mishmash of humanity's greatest projections and illusions and fantasies. Has nothing to do with it. Enlightenment just means reality. That's all. It means perceiving things the way they are. Perceiving reality as opposed to living in a dream state. That's not spiritual, though. It's just truth. To see that everything is actually one thing, appearing different, but it's still one thing or one nothing, there's nothing spiritual about it. There's nothing mysterious about it. There's nothing mystical about it. It's not higher or lower states of consciousness, because we're not talking about a state of consciousness. In terms of reality, it doesn't matter. Consciousness can assume an infinite variety of states. Have you noticed? You just sit there in the body for an hour. You'll watch it. It'll be amazing. It'll manufacture this state of consciousness, and then it'll go into that state, and this state, and that state. If it agrees with what I'm saying, it'll go into a state like, ooh, that's really interesting. If it disagrees, it'll go into another state. He's really full of it. I don't know what he's talking about. It'll manufacture that state. Do you see what I mean? The state of consciousness is totally unimportant. Even high states of consciousness, spiritual states of consciousness, all of that is a diversion. It's all an evasion. Yes, if you're in this for states of consciousness, go at it. Have a great time. You can create so many whacked out states of consciousness. You'll never get to the end of them. It's infinite. And if that's your thing, have at it. I'll see you later, you know. I don't know how much later, but we'll meet up in some way or another. You know. It's nothing more than thinking you're going to solve all your problems by winning the lottery or meeting the next hot-looking guy or girl or, buying the biggest house on the block or hey, having the biggest mystical experience on the block. None of it's going to lead to ultimate happiness, right? Because they all go. They come, they go, they decay. They're fun for a while, and then they wash away. And nobody really notices. We're so funny as human beings, We think we will be admired when we get something that other people don't have. When I have more money, when people love me more, when I'm noticed more, approved of more. Yeah, but when you are one of those more, people just, they aren't looking at you going, I'm so happy for you. That's not how they're relating, right? Your next door neighbor is rich. You don't look and go, I'm so unimaginably happy for you, But one thinks, if you were to get there, that's how everybody around you would think about you. They'd love you. They'd approve of you. But the thing is, they don't actually care. They only care in the way of, how do I get your $1 million? How does it go from you to me? How do I get your mystical experience? How do I get what you have? You see, that's all they're interested in. They're not admiring you. They're not even particularly happy for you. Any more than you're happy for them. Right? So it's so important to see that this thing about spiritual awakening, enlightenment, it's not about all that. Decades ago, Trungpa Rinpoche coined a wonderful phrase, spiritual materialism. Apparently nobody listened. You see, because everything I just talked about, whether it's in the material realm or the spiritual realm, keeps the mind in anticipation, in grasping, in wanting, in desire, in trying to arrive. See, and all of those impulses are impulses that are derived in the noisiness of mind and have nothing to do. They are the diversions away from reality. That's what it's amazing. At a certain point, when I realized, my God, 99% of what people are doing to wake up is actually reinforcing the dream state. It's shocking. You know that old thing we tell each other to calm ourselves into a totally deluded oblivion, like all roads lead to God. No, they don't. All paths lead to the top of the mountain. No, most paths lead nowhere near the top of the mountain. The good ones are, even the halfway decent ones, are only circling the bottom of the mountain. All the rest are usually going in the opposite direction as quickly as possible. Yes, you want to get really fancy. They'll go all the way around the globe and then they'll eventually wind up at the mountain. So, if you want to do that kind of silly thing. But it's not actually true. Actually, all paths lead away from the truth. How's that? All paths. There's no such thing as a path to the truth. The truth's already here. Where are you going? You see? Imagine my shoe said, I'm going to go find myself. Oh, wise shoe guru. Where do I have to walk to arrive at myself? Where do I go to find what is the path that will lead me to becoming what I am? What are you going to say to it? Should I go on that path, on that path? Should I walk that way, that way, that way? Should I hop up and down? What should I do? Could you imagine if your shoes start asking you such a ridiculous question? Well, why the hell did he ask me? You start to see how all this stuff works? Or more important, you start to see how all this stuff doesn't work? Yeah. So what would you, well, I know it's a silly example, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but what would you say to a shoe that's asking how far it has to walk or in which direction to arrive at being a shoe? What would you say? You see, if you were one of the deluded shoes, you'd say, there's the path to the true shoe. Right? And you'd probably find lots of people gather on the paths. And the more shoes that are walking in the same direction, the more certain they are that they're actually going in the right direction. Right? Safety in numbers sort of thing. How many shoes are going to pay attention to one little shoe on the side, not on a path at all, just sort of yelling out, what are you all doing? Where are you going? Do you not know what you are? And if you don't know what you are, how are you going to find out what you are? By walking. Your walking is just an avoidance of what you are. Well, then all the shoes might stop a moment, right? Scratch their soles or something, And ask the next obvious question. Now what do we do? Now that we've stopped and gathered at the side of the path for a moment, what do we do? What are you going to say? You put yourself in the position of the enlightened shoe. What are you going to say? What path are you going to cook up for them? Which direction are you going to tell it to walk? Do you see what I mean? So if you just imagine you're the enlightened shoe, you are in just as much of a bind as all the unenlightened shoes are. Because you can't tell them which direction to walk to become what they already are. And that's what they want. And that's what they believe in. And they literally can't imagine it being any other way.